So what do we mean change? So we looked a little deeper at change, and I will speak, and I'll go on and on about this, but you really have to have the visible obstacle really focuses that you really have to know your configuration is solid. It's well configured, properly configured, it's securely configured. So we do that. And in the visible obstacle, we type electrifying the fence. So we electrify the fence, we say, nobody can make a change now unless we follow proper change management. And you can't, and that's configuration management. And in configuration management, you have things like CIs, configuration items, and CMD, the configuration management database, where everything, you have basically a database that has everything in it. You patch something, if you release a new code on it or whatever, you're actually tracking it. But then in change management, we're classifying change. Is it a pre-approved regular change that should happen? Or is it the kind of change that we should actually say, this is a significant change? So we need to have stakeholders involved. We need to have a change advisory board, a CAB, they call it ITIL. And we need to think it through, plan a maintenance window, forward schedule, change those things. But we also can't do really good change management if we don't, in fact, have really good release practices. So when we release things or build software, or even just in a production environment where we put a new update to the operating system on a Cisco firewall. Are we thinking through in the release practice? Are we testing that without a live production system? So if we take something, there's a lot of release things and practices that ITIL gets into. Those three, I just gave everybody the Visual Ops Handbook one first version. Those three things are all connected. They're closed loop, if you will. So you work from a good configuration state, you open it up, make the change, do all the good change practices, you make sure the release is in place, and then you re-update the configuration because it's secure and well working. You lock it down and you move on to the next change. A lot of change. DevOps, before DevOps was cool. High rates are really change at success rates.
So Scott, you started this around 19, right?
I was 19 when I started in software store, actually, software retail.
So what at the age of 19 made you tell yourself, this is my life work? Like what happened at age? Okay, this is what I'm going to dedicate my life to.
Yeah, it's interesting. The story is kind of, I've always had a little bit of an upper itch. I grew up with a Raspberry patch that I did very well with high school, hired pickers and sold them to restaurants and all that. So I always had the itch, wanted to be in business. Was really into sports, so I was kind of a closet geek in high school. Back in those days, you kind of had your group, you have your heads and your, whatever, and your jocks. And so I didn't really talk a lot about it, but I love computers and played around quite a bit with them and different technologies early on. And that really led me into being interested in it. And surprisingly enough, I had an experience at a restaurant where I was kind of helping them try to do an inventory on a good old Commodore 64 way back in the day. And we couldn't figure out how to make it work. We ordered a piece of software way back then, like $300 was, super calc. And interestingly enough, it wouldn't do what we wanted to do. And that really got me intrigued. There's got to be better ways to do this and different ways to try software and make it work. And so I had a lot of kind of interest, if you will, in that area. And so I had a partner at the time. We went and started a software retail store and grew a couple of stores and did some different things with them. And over time, we started to sell PCs. And of course, the onset of the internet was just coming on. This is 1989. So beating myself here, but interesting stuff, going on at that time, the proliferation of the internet stuff. So we kind of grew in that rank, and a lot of PC setting up and supporting networks. There are a fair amount of kind of consulting companies out there, integration companies doing stuff. So we started with this old product called like Lantel and Novell and some of these old networks, today that are non-existent, that was really the whole thing. And at some point we decided, because the software business was kind of changing, evolving, and we were more interested in, doing software development. So we did a little bit of that on the side. And I bought into a franchise called Microage. It was a Fortune 500 based out of Tempe, Arizona. And they had these Microage computer centers that did training and a lot of network integration type services. And bought a handful of those locations, if you will, and had several people around the region standing up network and that kind of thing. And it was in that process when we were building out some pretty interesting networks and even working in some e-business infrastructure early on in some data centers like AT&T data center in Woody, California. Interesting data center, by the way, built during the Cold War to withstand a ground zero nuclear blast. I mean, this thing was solid, concrete everywhere. But in doing that, we had some customers that, hey, would you manage this? You guys built it and rolled it out for us. Would you take on some proactive management? And I'm like, wow. So we would ongoing charge you every month on a contract and provide X amount of services for that and define what those are. I thought this is a great business model. So that's where we basically cherry picked my top 5 people at my group, my Microage group, and we dubbed it the Advanced Networking Group. And that group is what really came eventually with the spin out of my IP services. And we purpose built a niche data center that we own. It's a SaaS, it's a SOC 2 Type 2 certified facility because we do house some critical data in there, banking data and that stuff. And that data center is 14,000 square foot. So it's not huge. It's pretty niche, but it's very well done. It's a M+1. So it's got a system plus.
Yeah, that's in Oregon.
Yeah, it's in Oregon. So for every system, we have backup systems, like 2 power feeds of the building, 2 UPS infrastructures, multiple internet connections. It's like typical data center. We're many of the big guys. And that's an interesting business. So that's where we housed our IP services business in that building and really spun out and started to migrate, customers into managed services type relationship. I joke before managed service was cool. That's what we're doing. And now, right, it's not managed services, it's MSSP, it's managed security services. So it evolved. We've reinvented ourselves and that's the summation of the story is, right, from software. I loved the idea of technology, always loved it, and was looking for ways to reinvent ourselves, stay relevant, and frankly, to be a successful, profitable business.
So from the time you started in tech in 19, what's something about tech that you're like really surprised? Like, man, I can't believe tech did this, whatever that it is.
Yeah, honestly, again, dating myself, I'd have to say the internet. I mean, at that time we thought, well, this is interesting. And there's, certainly things you can do. You can, telnet around the internet. That's the way we use the internet. Different browsers. We use way over as all the dial-up internet services. And I just didn't really know at that time that the proliferation of the internet would go so crazy. Like it would really become the network and that everything would be connected to network. So seeing where we were, literally, 30 years ago, 27, 26, 20 years to where we are today, I mean, yeah, it's unbelievable. And obviously, along the way, the internet, with all the amazing good that it brings, it certainly introduces a lot of threats and a lot of bad too. But I would have I know that's a right answer almost, but of course, you're surprised by the internet. But if you lived it, when I lived it back there, and we're selling software boxes off the shelves, kind of thing, to think that that's all going to be downloadable, SaaSified, if you will. I mean, just wouldn't have seen all that coming at that time. And so if I step back, it's like, wow, what a journey. This thing has evolved to an unbelievable level.
I've seen some people predict that whatever you think the internet did, AI is like 100,000 times more viral, whatever. What's your take on that?
Here we are again. I would totally agree. I think it's back to the future. We're in a revolution. There's no doubt. AI is changing our lives and will change our lives. And there's a lot of good and a lot of bad. I'm not an extremist, so I'm going to sit here and say it's going to take 80% of the workforce away, and that because I don't honestly believe that. But do I think it's going to completely change the way people do work? Will it have an impact on some workforces? Yes. But yeah, I think it's a crazy future that we're headed towards, and it's a rate of escalation. From again 1989, 90 to 2000, we started to have the onset of the internet, and things kind of changed. And then watching the internet from the 2000 to 2010, 2012, it increasing its speed of evolving and becoming prolific and more relevant and being able to develop things faster. But if we look back 3 years ago, COVID probably had something to do with that too, the pandemic. But, we look back just coming out of the pandemic, I mean, that for whatever reason, that was like a booster shot for the development of AI. And so it has been unbelievable to watch how fast and how quick the maturity, if you will, even the use cases of AI. So, yeah, I believe we're right in the middle of watching that.
I ChatGPT for a while. I downloaded the ChatGPT 5 the other day, and I texted friends of mine like, Skynet is here. Like, Skynet is here. Skynet is here, right? And like, it does. And so the talk finally downloaded Grok, and I put a picture, said make a video, and made a video. Me like, I know this ain't real. I didn't do this, but damn, I'm kind of like wondering, did I really do this now? Right?
Yeah,
that's how realistic, right?
Yeah, we're jumping right into AI. That conversation is again, scary and yet amazing all at the same time. I think the deep fake issue and some of those, and that's really just one aspect. There are multiple things to think about when you think about the nefarious activity that can go on in addition to just the cyber threats and all that. I mean, the things it can do, both good and bad, is very scary, very, very scary. And as a matter of fact, how real some of the deep fakes are just unbelievable. And they're only getting better, right? Again, the evolution is moving fast. So I can imagine a year or two from now, what people could do to people with deep fakes. It's very scary.
And so follow what you're like about your tech stuff, like what's something that you think has been a big disappointment as far as tech is?
Yeah, I think one of the big disappointments in tech, and this is a little bit interesting what I'm about to say, I think it's a little different take, but from my perspective is that it is, in a sense, very reliable, and yet people don't do the things they should be doing in terms of their hygiene of managing IT and in terms of their investment in IT. There's a little bit, particularly in the SMB space, kind of set it and forget it, and it's amazing how well things do work, and so there's a false sense of availability, IT management, sense of IT security. So there's a lot of people that are living, kind of with their head in the sand, because IT, if done fairly correctly and right, or once kind of figured out, it will kind of self-stabilize. And that stabilization or delivery of IT, people get numb. They expect it to happen. In the services business, probably one of the biggest pieces that gets us into trouble is the expectation. Somebody might with different levels of service level agreements, right? Somebody said, no, I don't need a lot of availability and uptime. I'm good. I could be down a couple hours a month. That's not a big deal. Boy, the second they're on 30 minutes in a month because something went wrong, what do you hear from them? Yeah, there is an expectation that it's 100%. So we used to joke, no matter what system you sell, you're really selling 100% because that expectation's there. But they don't necessarily want to invest in keeping up and the particular upgrades and invest in the management that really needs to happen, keep things highly secure. And that still is something that we're seeing today. So that's one of the challenges I see. A little different take on it is IT is in a way its own worst enemy, if that makes any sense.
It does. Can you talk about the Visible Ops book series?
Sure. So I showed about the original Visible Ops book, and that was, again, wildly popular back in